Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Topco, for the opportunity again for us to come here and showcase what we do and talk about working in the public sector, basically, what it means, how different or not so different it is from the private sector. Because I think many times we think that working in the public sector is the death of your career. And we do want to, we do want to demystify that. So I've got a couple of people that work in different organizations in the public sector, except for Richard, of course. He is one of our service providers. So he works with a number of clients within the public sector, and he can share his perspective as well in terms of how it is. Anyway, without wasting much time, we are looking at the fact that public service is also evolving, as with everything else around us. So we are going to explore what skills, leadership capabilities are required from public servants to thrive in government in 2030. And I just thought that to contextualize that, I'm going to ask the panel members, because they have all worked in private and in public sector, just to see if there's any parallels we can draw from, and perhaps highlight some of the complexities of working in the public sector and what it really requires to be a good public servant. So I'm going to ask each of you just to reflect on that. What makes it interesting, difficult, or complex, or any different working in the public service? I'll start with you, Makgopelo.
So thank you, Pindi. I think the first thing for me moving to the public sector was, wow, what a complex environment, you know, coming from a situation where your effort is aimed towards achieving profits to now getting to a situation where it's all about service. And with that mindset, I remember one of the popular questions I used to ask when we're making decisions would be, if this was your business, would you make the same decision? Because in my view, I felt like with the limited resources that we have in the public sector, we are not really maximizing them. And I think that was the biggest one for me. The previous speaker here was talking about job profiles. That was another thing that was, you know, in the private sector, we sweat our assets. And you get to the public sector, it's not in my job. And I think one of the things that we should be learning from the private sector, it's that. However, public sector has good policies and I think and frameworks, which I think those are the things that we should be learning as the private sector, learning from the public sector. I always laugh about this because I think I was so naive when I went to the public sector that in my mind, all I have to do is do my work to prove myself, you know, and I forgot, or I wasn't aware of the importance of being able to navigate the political space. And I think that to me was another light bulb moment. I've met a lot of excellent people in the public space. I think we should also get out of our shells to prove our excellence in that perspective, yeah.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I worked in the private sector for some time, production environment, and when I moved to the private sector, of course, it is a service-oriented environment. I work for Midva Local Municipality. Yes, the best run municipality in Gauteng. Yeah, of course, yes. So one of the most important things that I've realized is that the local government or the public sector is highly regulated. So whatever decision that you make, whatever action that you make is reviewable, because there are a lot of interests associated with or interacting with our environment. I mean, the community, the politicians, and of course the customers that we deal with. So it's highly regulated. So whatever that you do, it does not only affect the environment that you work in, like the yard, as I used to work at the production environment, but it's the entire community or the landscape of the environment called Midvaal. So it's one of the things that you must take into consideration. And of course, you need to be very sharp. You need to know that every decision that you do has implications, because the local government is a core face of the service delivery, and one decision can lead to many legislative comebacks. Thank you very much.
Richard?
Thanks so much. Yes, I think mine is a little bit similar to what has been mentioned. Personally, I worked for the private sector, and I moved from the private sector and went into business. And then through the business, we provide solutions to the public sector, and the journey has been quite interesting. But one thing that I would say is the parallels that are similar between corporate and public sector is that both are managed through policies. They both provide goods and services. Whether of course, the government provides goods and services to the public, but in order for them to do that, they need the right systems. They need the right policies. So I believe strongly that the public sector needs both systems and policies that the private sector is utilizing. And through our experiences as we provide these solutions, we saw how impactful they can be if we implement them correctly and help the public sector to use these technologies to implement these policies. So for us here, I think it's been a really nice journey. We learned a lot from the public sector. We realized that it's highly regulated, but the regulations are there for a reason. And then with the right implementation partners, they can really do a lot in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Pindi. Thank you, Pindi. I think moving from a public sector to a private sector to a public sector, then it requires one to have a shift in the mindset. You need to start thinking about things how they are done differently in the two sectors. As an example, you start thinking about your stakeholder management. Your key stakeholders in the public sector will be your community, will be the people you are servicing, whereas the private sector will be internally based. So also the whole narrative of the private sector being about profit-driven, whereas in the public sector becomes about service delivery, then makes you to start to think in terms of how do you operate. It invites you to think in terms of how do you make a contribution, not only for profit, but to render a service. As a public sector, you need to have a mindset of saying when people sees you, they need to see you as a person who's bringing change in their livelihood and sort of that. But it then gives you an opportunity. I mean, it's a given a myth that in the public sector things are slow. There is no agility in terms of processing. One coming from a private sector might be frustrated in the sense that the reporting timelines and the protocols there can be slow and all of those things. But it then creates you with an opportunity to change the sector, to bring in and not allow you to be swallowed by the rigid processes, but to bring agility, to bring your mindset in terms of how you are operating out when you are in the private sector. So it creates a platform for you to bring change in the public sector when you are coming from a private sector.
Thank you. I remember my former boss who recruited me to the space. One of the things he said to me, Pindi, please make sure you do not adapt and assimilate to the way of working and the pace that we work with. And I think over the past few years, it's really been my mission, because we normally say we don't do what we are doing, especially at SALGA, because it's our job. It's really our commitment to you as citizens of the country, so that we can, in whatever little way we can, shift things and make South Africa workable for all of us. Makgopelo, back to you. You spoke about some of the complexities of working in public service. If you can please expand on that and perhaps touch on how systems thinking could help public servants tackle some of those complex societal challenges, such as inequality, digital transformation, etc.
So, yeah, thanks, Pindi. So one of the, I think, challenges of, it's not a challenge, it's probably one of the limitations of the public sector is working within a mandate. It's a good and a bad thing at the same time. The complexity of the SOEs comes with the mandate, and that mandate in itself then creates the silo mentality. Because our mandate starts here and ends here, it creates a limitation in mindset to say, how can we solve a problem that cuts across our different mandates? I mean, you talk about societal problems. Unemployment, it's not a social problem only. Unemployment, it's an education problem. It is health problem. So if we start looking at our problems at that level and start leveraging on our separate individual capabilities to be able to solve those problems, we should be able to succeed as a country. I mean, one example I normally use is SARS can find me anywhere. I hope SARS people are not here. When SARS is looking for me, SARS will know that I've left the country. They will know that I didn't pay them. They can access my bank account. But when I go to a public hospital, I need to fill in a form, even though I'm using the same ID number that SARS is using. So why are we not learning from the capabilities and the excellence that is coming from that environment to improve on what we are offering? So I believe that if we start to adopt a systems thinking, especially on issues that affect us cross-sectional, we should be able to bring in better results as a country. We say the Department of Health has limitations in terms of budget, but whatever we are seeking from the Department of Health, one sector has delivered already. So why am I going to reinvent the wheel when I can actually jump into the bandwagon, you know? So I really believe that mindset needs to change as public servants, and we should actually see the strength of working together as opposed to the limitations of silo mentalities.
I like what you're saying about the mandate, because I think almost every entity of government has a very specific mandate, stipulated mandate. And while some are very ambitious, like ours, we're trying to change the whole of local government. 400 people. Anyway, story for another day. Then we're always talking about professionalizing the public sector, which is a concept that irritates the out of me. Because I don't get how I'm an HR professional that went through the same education system and training and development and worked in the private sector, doing very well. And I come to the public sector, and then there's this concept of I need to professionalize, which for me is a challenge I'm always posing to the people that we work with, that how come I'm an engineer in the mining sector, and no one ever talks about when I need to be professionalized. I come to this space, we talk about professionalizing. You have accountants in financial services. You know, you don't hear about that concept. You come to this public space, we need to be professionalized. Like, but I get, because it's the experience we get when we interact with those public services that we go as citizens. But yeah, it does irk me quite a bit. Let's talk about that. What does it mean in the context of government becoming more digital, data-driven, and citizen-centric?
Look, the concept of professionalization goes beyond one belonging to a professional body. It goes beyond that. It talks to a sector which is trying to introduce and building a workforce which is skilled, which is agile, which is citizen-centric and service delivery driven. It talks about accountability. It talks about ethics, being an ethical person in your space in a public sector. Now you are saying, how do we respond to the digital transformation which we have? Now, as a professional in the public sector, you need to adapt to change. You need to adapt to change. You are living now in the world of 4IR, wherein there are a lot of elements of IA and all of these digital things. Now, as a professional, how do you take that and start to translate it into your profession, and it works and contribute positively in the space which you are operating in? A concept which today we always talk about is data analytics. In your space as an HR practitioner, how do you take the data which you gather, either from an example, the data from the leave which your people takes? How do you take that data and analyze it, and that data then makes an input in terms of your strategy and your planning, and make your organization to be responsive based on the data which you're taking? So also, professionalization also will call to you to also be able to be data-driven. I spoke about that, but also to be able to operate in a multidisciplinary dimension. You are not going to be a person in a professional world. Say in HR, you are only dealing with learning and development. But there are multidisciplines in the space which you are operating on. You need to tap out of just one dimension and be able to respond into generic issues which are able to contribute to an organization. So in terms of data-driven, let's be citizen-centric. Let's use the data in a professional way, and that data needs to help us to be agile and responsive and be able to influence the strategy and the outcomes of the organization, why we exist, and what we need to deliver to our citizens.
Thank you, Dan. Richard, he's talking a lot about agility and all of that. Why is that important for public servants?
So, if you look at the world, where we've come from and where we are going, the world has become much smarter and much more complex. With that, the public servants, as was mentioned, they are more connected and they are more demanding than ever. Agility is very critical, especially for the public servant, in order for them to be able to adapt to these complexities and the smart servant that we are serving, or the smart public that needs to be served. And with that being said, the public servants, they have to be more agile than ever before. Meaning that, sorry, I'm just got my notes. They need to be able to evolve with speed. They need to be able to keep up with the current demands. And for them to be able to do that, the way that, the demands are so high, I don't believe that they can do it if they are, trying to deliver the service the way they did 5 or 10 years ago. They need the right solutions. Data, there's so much data that's moving around now. For us to be able to analyze that, it talks to how the public servants will collect this data, analyze the data, and use this analyzed data to deliver first-class services to the public. And that means that, they need to be agile, but at the same time, they need to implement the right tools that goes hand in hand with supporting their agility. And that means, they need to think differently, the way, as opposed to the way that the thinking was in the past.
Thank you. Someone yesterday said relevance is a choice. So we need to make that choice to remain relevant, not only to our work, but to the needs of the people that we are trying to serve in our communities. Walter, you said that Midvaal is the best performing municipality, and I'm not going to go into the president's stance on who's running that municipality, but it is one of the best performing. So, how has ethical leadership, empathy, and emotional intelligence helped Midvaal achieve that position of being the best in Gauteng, and what can other public entities learn from that?
Okay. Well, without sounding too arrogant, but the president has said it, that you need to come to Midvaal. By the way, I want to challenge the conference to come to Midvaal next year, so that we provide you best service, so that you see the experience that we're talking about. Right? Anyway, I think the first thing that we managed to get right is that we focused on good governance as Midvaal. And how did we do that? From the top, we managed to set a proper ethical tone, given that in the local government, we are all over the news: corruption, non-service delivery, poor interaction with people and all of that. So we set a proper ethical tone for everyone in the municipality. And secondly, we clarified our standards. If you do this, this is the consequence. Secondly, we invested in a competitive staff attraction and retention. I mean, I have my colleagues here, you see they are young, they are competent, Alfie and Ntabiseng, and Queen just went out. And the other thing is that against the flow of what many municipalities do in terms of cadre deployment, we have opted rather to give to award merit instead of cadre deployment. In other words, we don't deal with patronage. There's no patronage. You get rewarded for what you have competent on. And then that is the type of ethical leadership that we have established from the top all the time. That is what we do. And in terms of empathy, you must understand that in terms of local government, the empathy is not only limited in the context of the organization. You must also extend it to your community, to the stakeholders outside. So empathy in our context would mean that you also have to understand what our residents want, what would be best advisable for them, and then you incorporate their demands. We call it an SDBIP. You go to them, you get a mandate from them, and you incorporate in your systems. And basically, that's what we are doing: good governance, good ethical leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. He's talking about recruitment and merit and all of that. Then, if you can just maybe elaborate on that in terms of how can recruitment, training, and performance management in the public service make sure that we're able to attract and retain future-ready talent?
Look, the first question which one need to answer is, why are you recruiting? When you know why you are recruiting, then it already says to you, you need to profile the kind of candidate which you are looking for. once you, and the profiling must then talk to what you want to achieve with that particular recruiting. So gone should be days wherein we recruit for the sake of recruiting. Gone should be days in the public sector wherein we recruit because I have a relationship with Pindiwe, whatever relationship which I have outside and all of those things. Because some of those things then have an impact in terms of what we want to achieve. And now we need to change our mindset in terms of how do we recruit people who are going to ensure that we meet our citizen-centric goals, service delivery. How do we make sure that the talent which is there already inside, it's a talent which is going to be able to help us to be able to achieve the goals which we have set for us in the 5 years, in the 1 year, or whatever the case might be. But also, and as I spoke about retention must also be intentional. Intentional in the sense that you don't want to lose your good talent. You don't want, and how do you manage that? You should manage that by making sure that you have attractive benefits which will make these people to stay. I mean, in local government today, we are sitting with a situation wherein we are struggling to even attract your chartered accountants to come and be our CFOs. There are a lot of struggles, but what do we need to do as a sector to be able to change the mindset and be able to keep our talent and retain them and be able to make sure that this can, I mean, you don't want a situation wherein this particular individual is working for this municipality or for this government for a 5-year term, then you get, or maybe even 3 years, and then you get someone else who's coming in and there's no continuity, there is no building up in terms of the systems and the protocols which that person has already established. A new person comes in, new direction, change the whole mindset. So we need to start thinking about how do we sustain our talent? How do we keep our talent? How do we make sure that our people are continuously capacitated? I spoke earlier about the transformation in terms of our space. I mean, I'm from an age wherein when we started in our industry, I'm not revealing my age though, wherein we started in this career path as personnel management. Then it grew up to be called human resources management. Now you're talking about human capital, so that already shows you the transformation of the sector. Now you need then to make sure that you continue to upskill your talent so that when there is transformation and growth in the space which they're operating in, they are able to reflect.
I think the world is driven by digital transformation, artificial intelligence. My colleagues have already spoken about some of the skills that we need. Data analytics is key. We know that for us to be able to make business decisions, we need to use that information to influence the decisions. That's the biggest one for me. Digital dexterity, I think all the people that are sitting here that are probably my age understand the struggles of now being flexible around artificial intelligence and working with the tools that we have now. I think emotional and cultural intelligence, and I'm mentioning cultural intelligence mostly because we have our corporate culture that is only talking about humans. However, we have an addition to the family, which is now the robots that we need to learn to work with in our workplace. So we need to have cultures that are accommodating of those robots in the workplace in the future. Mostly for me, what's important is also the ethical leadership. I think Walter spoke about ethical leadership. Robots cannot replace humans because they don't have emotions. And I think that is our biggest competitive advantage as humans during this era. So it's important that we are able to develop those skills and are able to feed what we want these robots to do, because we know that it's garbage in, garbage out with the robots. So it's important that we have those skills. How do we develop them? Collaboration. I think some of them are skills that you can get in the classroom, but for me, what I'm seeing now is it is time for reverse mentorship.
Yeah.
The 2Ks are here, and the 2Ks, I like the response. The 2Ks are are very advanced in this world that we want to get into or thrive in, if us as the 1Ks are not prepared, if we are not prepared to learn from them, then we are not going to thrive in this world that we are pushing ourselves in. So it's quite important that we are intentional about reverse mentorship. Find that 2K that you will work with in the workplace, outside the workplace, that will help you to navigate this space. Because if we don't do that, then we won't be able to, in fact, we won't even be able to create a workplace that will be accommodating of this new kind of workforce that we want to attract.
Thank you very much. I'm not even going to give them an opportunity for closing comments because I have 5 minutes left. I think I would also add on that list, Makgopelo, the ability to navigate the political space. Because I think being able to balance your professional ethics, what it requires you to do, and taking instructions from an elected or political official is one of the things you need to master as a public servant. And where do your loyalties lie? And also just being able to navigate the complexity within which we work. They spoke about regulation. It is a very regulated. So when you hear people say we have a clean audit, it doesn't come easy because of all the things you need to comply to end that. And the complexity of it's not just my shareholder. And in this case, the shareholder is very diverse and complex. So it's not just the person who has shares in the organization and the people that work with. It's actually, I like referencing everything I do to my mom who lives in Kaskamaok in the village, how I make sure that she's able to access the services. It is the business that's trying to conduct business in that municipal area where we are providing service, and how to make sure that it's easier for them to do business in those environments. Thank you very much for having us. 3 minutes for questions, and then we will. You owe me 20
No questions. Oh, no questions.
Okay, thank you very much. It was nice. And hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference.